this meeting to order. Thanks. We're going to start with we'll start with roll call and then we'll do the land acknowledgement.
Lindsay Ryan.
Here.
Tanya Booty.
Here.
Great. Let me just mention that this is the August 22nd, 2022 Curriculum and Policy Committee meeting, and the time is 4:38 p.m.
We take time to acknowledge that the land we meet on is the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Ottawa. This land also served as an important meeting place for Miami, Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, Anoka, Sauk, Fox, Peoria, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and other tribal nations. This land has long been a center for indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. Located at the intersection of several great waterways, the region has become a site of travel and prosperity. We acknowledge Evanston and John Evans are tied to the massacre of Arapaho and Cheyenne for railroads and westward expansion, upon which John Evans developed his wealth and founded Evanston. This land was violently taken under settler colonialism through genocide and open warfare, and the region that is now Illinois and Chicagoland is still home to thousands of Native people who are actively struggling for sovereignty, self-determination, and justice. The genocidal acts of settler colonialism extended to peoples of Africa and their enslaved descendants. Despite Illinois eventually prohibiting slavery, slavery was accepted as a practice before and after statehood. The vestiges of slavery remain present throughout the United States and directly affect the descendants of enslaved peoples. Descendants who helped define the African diaspora, rich and heterogeneous communities descended from African peoples. The genocidal pattern of violence patterns of violence against peoples of African descent and indigenous people have been replicated to exclude and harm people from many intersecting marginalized identities: religious, minoritized, disabled, and LGBTQ identified peoples, Black and indigenous people of color, and people of color writ large in the United States. These patterns of violence demonstrate the pursuit to end state-sanctioned violence against Black and indigenous people of color is a daily struggle for liberation from continued social, political, and economic anti-Black racism and oppression. Today we acknowledge that we are living, breathing, loving, grieving, laughing, and sharing space on unceded territory. May we learn to honor the historical and contemporary presence and power of the people and their belief that we must be caretakers of this land and waters for the livelihood of future generations. The land that surrounds us is part of who we are. It reflects our histories. It is within District 65's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about Black and indigenous peoples and marginalized peoples writ large, consistent with our commitment to equity. We will work towards sharing truth and promoting healing for the sake of our children and families. It is important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on the land and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in the past tense or only in the historical context. Colonialism is a current and ongoing process, and we need to understand our present participation. We encourage everyone consuming this message to continue expanding their knowledge and reduce their harm through awareness of local mutual aid models for survival and engagement with online and local resources such as the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative and the Shorefront Legacy Center. All right, with that being said, The Curriculum and Policy Committee approves the meeting agenda for tonight's meeting.
Yes.
You got a second.
Oh, second. I'm sorry. That's me. My apologies. Yes.
Tanya Moody?
Yes.
I'm ready this time. Go ahead.
All right. The committee recommends the minutes of the June 13th, 2022 Curriculum and Policy Committee meeting be approved as presented.
Second.
Lindsay Ryan?
Yes.
Tanya Moody?
Yes. And now we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda, public comments. Members of the public are welcome and invited to address the Curriculum and Policy Committee during open public meetings. Speakers are discouraged from using the public comment period to air specific concerns about staff members. Being mindful that the public comment period is not a suitable forum for fact-finding or resolution of disputes. Rather, we encourage members of the public who have concerns about specific district employees to follow district communication guidelines found in the student handbook. Please remember to state your name, that you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Also note it's not customary for the committee to respond to public comments. The best way to correspond with members is by emailing schoolboard@district65.net.
We do not have anyone signed up for public comments.
Okay. Thank you so much. Then we will move on to item 5, curriculum review update. And Biz and I have divided the packet up in half, no fancy math here, between the two of us.
Would you like to start with questions?
I'll let you go ahead and start since you're at the top of the packet.
All right. Stacy, if I can ask you, first of all, I wanted to say, I hope that others read this packet because there's just so much work that has been done this summer to get everything ready for the school year, and I really want to express my appreciation for everyone for the heavy lifting to make sure we were ready for the school year. And I want to particularly shout out to HR as we're reading, other districts down 800 positions. The fact that we are almost 100% staffed is really incredible. So kudos to the entire HR team and to Dr. Turner and her team to getting principals and buildings ready, and just everybody. Reading the packet was very exciting to see all the things that are coming. So I just had a couple of questions. Stacy, I was seeing, we have this new change in law around the sexual health curriculum, and I'm excited to see some of the things that we're developing there. Knowing that we have had challenges with rollout of certain content in the past, I just wanted to check in about what our plans for rolling out this info to parents and caregivers looks like. How can we help people understand that this is a law change and we're complying with the law, and what they can expect when their kids are going through this content?
Sure. So there are a couple specific things that we're doing. One, there is a webpage that went up last week on the District 65 website that does contain information on essentially what we're doing and why we're doing it, so the connection to the state law.
Right.
It also includes a link to the curriculum guide, and the curriculum guide provides research on why we teach comprehensive sexual health. It also includes the approach and practices aligned to it, as well as the research base. And then the third link on that page is the scope and sequence, which includes links to all of the lessons that are being taught in each grade. And kind of delineate a few things, and the state is still teasing out some of this language. This is a comprehensive sexual health approach. The sexual health curriculum really runs from 5th through 8th grade, and the personal growth and safety aspects really begin in K4. And I think the important part about the National Sex Ed Standards is there are really 6 legs of those standards. And some of this is about healthy relationships, and that's the type of learning that we're doing in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. That contributes then into how do we navigate relationships in intermediate grades to upper grades as we're making decisions within our relationships. And so we have the website, we have the curriculum guide, we have the scope and sequence. With the state law, aspects of this instruction will also be opt-out, and the letters are also on the website, and we are working on they're actually in translation right now, so everything will be teed up for educators to start at the beginning of the year. We have partnered with the Evanston YWCA, who's been a partner throughout this work with us, as well as Eyes Open Iowa, and we have a commitment to run community education sessions in the grade bands. We'll do a community education session in K2, 3-5, and 6-8, and the YWCA is going to support us in running those sessions. They will be advertised and we will offer them in the late fall. Additionally, we have a second learning opportunity for family and communities who want to go deeper in that learning, and that will be kind of a multi-series, multi-session learning opportunity that the YWCA is also going to co-sponsor with us, and that most likely will be in January, February. We're ironing out the dates, and we'll work when we push out communications about the lessons. We'll also communicate about those parent information sessions.
One question that just came to me is thinking about how it may need to look different for the next few years than it will 5 years down the road, because we have many students who got components of this content during the pandemic, which means they may not have been online for it, or their teacher may have covered it in a different way than they would have covered it in the classroom. So, thinking about, okay, the 7th grade lesson that the Y is doing now, how do they need to make sure that they're covering some basics that maybe they don't need to cover 5 years from now, but that they might need to revisit because the people's baseline foundation may not be as strong?
So I want to address a couple things there. First, the philosophy and the approach on this is that District 65 educators deliver the lessons.
Okay.
And that is, the YWCA will continue to offer support where schools request it this year around some of the Aaron's Law lessons.
Thank you for the clarification.
But ultimately, we want to build the capacity of our District 65 educators to be delivering the learning, because that allows that learning to be coming from somebody who the students are in relationship with.
Great.
And so it ultimately means that if there are going to be follow-up questions or conversations, they're having that with somebody who is present in their life on a regular basis. We would be teaching those lessons. One of the things that is nice about the instructional material that we've that we're using for this, it's rights and responsibilities. There's a third R that just ran away from me, but I'll get it. Respect, rights, and responsibilities. Is that the lessons kind of cycle back to each other, and so they connect upon each other. So when I think about some of the lessons in the middle school, they naturally kind of reconnect to the learning in 4th grade about puberty, and 5th grade about changes in physical changes, emotional changes associated with moving into puberty. And so I think we can note that, people will be aware of that, but the lessons do connect with each other and build off each other in a way that I think we'll be able to address some of the gaps in content.
Just having had many 5th graders during the pandemic in my own household, I think that we can't assume that everybody got the content teachers were juggling a lot, so trying to do that and making sure everybody is present and engaged online, we just may want to make sure that at least for those couple of years where they're revisiting those things, that they maybe aren't treating it as a revisit, they might need to teach again.
Absolutely fair. Yep, we'll go ahead and keep that in mind. Thank you, Biz.
Yep, thanks.
I did not read through the sexual health curriculum section deeply because Biz and I divided the packet up, but I did have...
it's a big packet.
It's a big packet. Teamwork makes the dream work. But I had a curiosity about how LGBTQ inclusive the sexual health component is, and also how holistic and comprehensive reproductive health is included in terms of abortion as health care, and the total reproductive health care component.
So 2 questions there. First, within the 6 strands that are part of the National Sex Ed Standards, we do address gender, gender identity, gender continuum, and the instructional material we're leaning into works to be very conscious about how they address the different constraints of sex at birth as opposed to gender continuum, gender identity throughout the lessons, and they make a decision as to when they use particular language. Additionally, we did work with the YWCA to go and rewrite a couple lessons where we felt like, okay, we want to make sure that the attention to the language is even clearer in those lessons. The third leg of this is we had some District 65 educators. We had an ad hoc committee last year that read through the suggested lessons and identified places where we felt like we needed to strengthen lessons or if we needed to introduce additional lessons. And so there are a couple places where we have introduced additional lessons because of the essentially kind of the learning and us wanting to make sure that we had access to that language and identity earlier. So we've done those things. Additionally, the materials that we're using do both talk about reproduction. They also do talk about essentially the ideas that abstinence is the safest way to stay safe and healthy, but we also do address condom usage. We do address essentially different ways to control pregnancy. I would need to go in and specifically check about abortion. That one does not, so that would be a follow-up question that I would need to answer.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I just, it's a topic of conversation, I think, for a lot of young people, and specifically deeply impacts folks who are marginalized as a result of their income as well as their race and ethnicity more deeply than other folks because of the way birth outcomes look. And I think it's a part of understanding one's sexual health and like autonomy as a human being, not assuming that it's going to be completely applicable to the age group of children that we're educating, but just in terms of having the foundational knowledge about one's body. I think that it would be part of healthcare to have some awareness of. And I think also probably thinking more like middle school, how reproductive health and sexual health is discussed and how queer inclusive those conversations are, so that regardless of folks' identity or orientation, that they're getting accurate information about how to keep themselves healthy and also understand their body is the other motivation for my question.
Yeah, and I really do believe that between the instructional materials that have been selected and some of the modifications that have been made, that we really have taken a very inclusive approach, and I think students will be able to see themselves and see their experiences in the learning, and you really are absolutely correct that it goes back to the idea, personal and sexual health, and it has a lot to do with identity, and we're trying to make sure we're bringing forth identity, allowing people to see themselves in the learning and to leave with what will allow them to be able to stay safe. And I think a lot of the research really contributes to the fact that students are, research says that students are much less likely to engage in risky behaviors once they are regularly receiving this type of learning and education, and so we're really trying to make sure that people see the different experiences so that they can have that benefit.
Is there an opportunity for us to have a student focus group on the content before it gets released to students, right? Like, so that have some kids from the GSA, have some kids from various groups that hear what you have, like, it could even be that our educators are practicing their content and getting some input of how certain things land.
Yeah, that's something we could consider. I know we did have some students from a GSA give us feedback on some lessons last year. Some of those lessons have been brought over and continued, but they have not particularly taken a look at some of the 3Rs materials that we're drawing on now. So that's something that I can look into.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just for the folks who are listening, to clarify, Aaron's Law is, you said, the content that the YWCA is helping to facilitate, and that is specifically around consent and...
Yeah, it's the ideas of safe touch and consent. And the YWCA has been a strong partner in helping us to deliver that and meet that particular state requirement over time. Some schools have delivered it on their own. Some schools have relied more on the Y. And again, we're trying to make that shift into delivering the content ourselves.
Okay, just wanted to make sure everyone understood and followed. Did you have questions about the other parts of the packet?
Yeah. I don't have any other ones for Stacy, though, do you?
No.
Okay. Donna, can I ask you some questions?
If it's ASCs, it's probably going to be me.
Great. I was going to ask Donna whether she was playing the role of Lee today or whether someone else is, so I'll ask Donna the Donna question first. Hi, Donna. Donna and I got to sit together this morning. So I would love to hear more. I'm super excited about the social emotional learning screener, and I would love to hear more about kind of what type of things will be assessed, and then what supports get activated based on the needs identified in that assessment.
Absolutely. So we'll be launching the DESA, which stands for the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment. Big fan of student strengths. And it is very closely aligned to the CASEL 5 competencies, but it breaks down into 8 sub-skills, and I did link that in there. Being self-management, self-awareness, goal-directed behavior, social awareness, relationship skills, personal responsibility, decision-making, and optimistic thinking. So essentially what will happen is every student, K to 8, it's teacher rater, so that means the teacher's the one rating it, not the students taking it. And so they will do the DESA Mini as our universal screener, so every student will have that screening. It's about a minute per student. And all that goes through Branching Minds, which is our MTSS platform. So all that data is housed there. They don't have to go to a different platform. They take it, and all the data is in there as well. And there are particular cut scores, and if students have typical or strengths in particular areas, they'll just be shown as like tier 1. But if students have some areas that they're ranked as either strength, typical, or needs instruction, it's very strength-based. It's not a deficit-based model. Those will be kind of flagged, and essentially what educators can do is use that information to inform instruction in their classroom, like the typical direct SEL skills, but also our social workers, if they're working with small groups, they can really closely align to what is coming out of that assessment. So that's the mini. That's just quick. Everyone has that. We also have the full DESA, which is more of a diagnostic that goes a little bit deeper, which then gives students both a raw score, a percentile, and a performance level on all 8 of those indicators. So you can essentially find where students are really strong and what areas they're strong in, and use those to leverage the areas where they need instruction. And so instead of going to like an at-risk model, we're really more moving to an at-promise model, which is the actual language that's used in DESA. It's like students, they coming from different areas, different experiences, but they all have things that they're at promise, things that are there for them that we can build on. I actually just did my first in-person DESA training today, yay, with Rice School, who's on top of it and ready to go. And we really looked at like, okay, if a student presents these particular scores, how can we leverage their strengths to support the areas where they need instruction? And we will start that in the fall and late October. You need at least 4 weeks with students before teachers can rate them. They have to actually know who they are. And then we'll do it again in the spring. And that's just the mini. It's optional for educators to use it as like a progress monitor throughout the year or in the winter, but we're just gonna start fall and spring for this year.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions. So how does that, I'm assuming that is mostly housed with the classroom teacher in an elementary school. Where does it live in a middle school?
So same. So everything lives in Branching Minds. So any educator who has access to that student in Power School, so let's say our arts educators or our PE educators, they will actually have access to every single student that they see, so they can see those results for every single student who's on their roster. And then, of course, social workers, psychologists, they have school-wide access, so they can see every student. Same with our principals, so they can be able to group students across the entire school.
Okay, and then have there been any considerations of how we adapt that for pre-K? I know they're doing more with SEL in general in pre-K, so where is the space for it there?
So the whole DESA, there's a whole DESA suite. We have the DESA Mini, the DESA Diagnostic. They also have a DESA Second Step, which aligns directly to Second Step, so you can assess how the impact of Second Step is happening. They do have a DESA for early childhood. They have it all the way down to like 2- and 3-year-olds, and then like the 3-4 pre-K. We don't have that quite yet, just because this is our first year with this, but it is an availability for us. But with our pre-K, part of the T Strategies Gold, which is what their curriculum and what they're kind of assessed on, there is a social emotional component to that assessment. So that happens twice a year as well for our pre-K educators.
And what's the frequency of this screener?
This is twice a year, fall and spring, with the option to do it in the winter.
Do you have any? Thank you, Donna. All right, so Stacy, you're playing the role of Lee today?
I am. Lee Hart unfortunately couldn't join us today.
That's right. I actually
She
passed
gave
her
me
as
good
I was
data.
driving in. Excuse me. So last year we had like all sorts of charts of what percentage every school was in terms of how filled they were. I understand we're in a totally different place than we were last year as we were starting the program, but it did beg the question of kind of like, what is our fill rate right now? Do we anticipate any schools not being able to start with this support for the year? If you can walk us through that.
Sure, absolutely. Just get myself positioned here. All right, so to give you a quick sense, currently 26 of our 44 positions are filled as of today, and that fill rate right now is 59%. We have an additional 9 tutors that have been recommended for hire by school leaders and are working their way through the HR process and the onboarding. We expect that those tutors should be able to come on board within 1 to 2 weeks, which would put us at 35 of 44 hired, or approximately an 80% fill rate. So that would put us, the reality is we'll we'll work on our training later this week, early next week, so it would get us about a starting rate of about 80% fill. We are holding weekly ASE tutor training, so as soon as they come on, we're getting them trained and moving them. We're planning on doing that through September. And at a minimum, we'll ensure that trained tutors can enter their school communities as quickly as possible. To give you a quick sense of where we are, Dawes, Kingsley, and Walker are fully hired at this point. And everybody has, with the exception of one school, has at least one of their positions filled. That school that does not have one filled does have 2 people in the pipeline to be hired. Okay. So at this point, we've got a tutor in position at every school with the exception of one, and it looks like that will change within the week.
Great. That was my next question, that it wasn't like 0% at this school and 100% at that school. So we should be ready to start off with those supports at every school.
Absolutely.
Any additional questions from you?
No.
I think that's all I have on the packet.
All right.
Thank you, Stacy.
I have, I've read the second part of the packet. And I have questions for HR. I'm sorry, let me look at specific names. Ashley?
We can fill in there in a meeting.
Oh,
says,
okay.
but typically,
All right, great.
Yeah, I can.
Well, then I don't need to call specific names. So I was curious about, I'm excited that we've brought guest educators back into our coffers and that we are having success in filling those roles, which has been a challenge for us for a long time. But I'm curious if we're providing beyond diversity for our guest educators.
So we will be. We were still going through the process to get them vetted. We have a training that's coming up in the next month or so that will be, in October. It's 2 months away from now, that we will offer to the community as well as to our guest educators. So that's coming, and we'll be sending something out to the PTA and also prioritizing the guests. We had 80 sign up for the last one, and we were able to get 71 in just in one session. So it's pretty popular, and we'll continue to keep really good records on that. So, yeah.
Excellent. That's good to hear. And then I was really excited to celebrate earlier today and read the packet about the success of the CREATE program and being able to move some of our graduates into classrooms. I'm wondering, I was curious to hear a little bit more about any adaptations that are being made to the program this year from learnings that happened last year.
Yes.
And how we're continuing to refine the program.
It's definitely been adaptation. So our first year, we had 2 university partners, Northwestern and National Louis. It was a 1-year, extremely intense program. And so we got feedback. We were really, as you heard us speak earlier today, we were really listening to everyone. And what we heard was that that program is really intense, considering everything that was going on in the world. So we've now shifted in a partnership with Chicago State University, and the cohort that we have this year is a 2-year program versus a 1-year. And this gives time for our lead teachers, the residents themselves, and even our people who are leading that work to spend time in the trenches a little bit. And what we're finding with, of course, with student enrollment declining and things of that nature, the placement of teachers is not as great in certain areas as it's been in the past. And so we are strategically looking at our retirees over the next 2 years so that we can easily place our residents in them. So yeah, it went from a 1 year to a 2 year. The university is working on another 1 year program that may launch next school year, so we may have 2 cohorts finishing up at the same time, which will be great for us. But yeah, definitely made those shifts this year.
Does that change the attractiveness of the program for some folks? Like, were people excited about getting it done in a year?
Surprisingly, people were excited about the 2 year, especially if you get a chance to develop and incubate for 2 full years versus 1, and you're working in the district that you're going to be placed in. So yeah, it was we had to make that call as we were looking at our options and how the first year went. We reflected significantly, and then made that shift.
Great. And then the last HR question I have was about the concierge and face liaison positions. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about how they're being integrated into the schools and how school communities are learning about their presence.
Yeah, so the face liaisons, full throttle, they started with their staff today. Well, actually, they started last week. They're only at Haven for this year. So they were heavily involved in the opening of the school. They had ambassadors. They were passing out snacks and helping them with their schedules and things like that. So that went really well last year and today. And tomorrow they'll be fully ingrained with the staff that just returned. Half the face staff have been through Beyond Diversity. The others will be going through the next cycle. And they're also going to be going through some other trainings around relationship building. Concierge as well. The concierge first day was technically today. So today they spent the morning with us, the afternoon with their respective schools. And then tomorrow they'll have an opportunity to connect again. They'll get some additional training from our manager of special response around just safety and engagement piece. And then they'll be back with the staff. And we did for the concierge and the face that did not, I'm glad you asked that did not attend BD. They're going to go through this training with Dr. Larkart tomorrow afternoon. That's 90 minutes. It's been a huge hit. We're using this race and equity training. That's about 90 minutes. Is giving them at least some segue into what our expectations and our culture and what that really means for D65.
Okay. And how about de-escalation training?
Yes, they've been through CPI. They did that last week with it was last week, right?
Yeah. And we still have a few more of our face liaisons that need to get CPI trained. But they have been trained for de-escalation. They've been working with Mr. Palmer extensively, and I met with all of them last week for just orientation and setting the groundwork in terms of expectations in our schools.
Anna Marie, how many people did we have in CPI last week with you all?
Between the 2 August dates, we had
85 people trained in CPI. Long way from the 20.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what we need to hear. Did you have any questions from the HR section of the packet? I had a question from the RAD section of the packet.
Simone, well, I will take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There was mention of, actually, I think it might have been mentioned in RAD as well as HR. But there was some mention of working with the NERA project, and we haven't heard any updates on NERA in a while. So I was just curious to hear a little bit more about the collaborative work that our teams are doing with NERA.
So I will have to definitely get back with the full response on that because we have done some, I think some shifts in the NERA partnership a little bit with Dr. Griffin and Dr. Green. So I can definitely make sure that we get something fully shared with the board so we can update you on specifically what those projects are. I think what we did prior, there were projects that we were kind of lingering around in, and Stacey, you may be able to chime a little bit on this too, that we didn't have the full engagement over the last couple of years, and I think we've done some revamp and some redirection. And there it was the whole group collectively decided to do like a reset.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is that about right?
Yeah, I don't have any additional information
Okay.
on that than
Yep.
what you just shared.
Okay. Yep.
And did you, okay. And in terms of, Raphael, I had a question for you. I was curious to hear a little bit more, and actually, Dr. Horton, you referenced this. I think we had in our bargaining agreement getting notice from retirees like several years out in terms of plans for retirement. And I was just curious to hear a little bit more about, and I think you may have mentioned retirement in the packet. Sorry, my touch screen is acting a little unpredictable. But I was curious to hear a little bit more about how we are preparing retirees for their retirement planning.
So our role as a district is a very delicate role that we have. We have to be careful not to become a fiduciary in their retirement planning, because what it does is it puts us in jeopardy of someone coming back and saying, you told me about this and I acted on it, and now I've lost money, or I've made a decision that doesn't help my retirement decision. What we normally would do is have them talk to a financial planner, and in trying to plan for their retirement. My role in the district is to be a fiduciary for the board, which is make sure that I'm really protecting the interest of the board. So my role is that of a ministerial role to a retiring teacher, just provide them just basic information about how they can plan for their retirement, then advise them to talk to a tax planner or retirement planner for individual retirement planning that they will have. So it's a tricky situation that we face. We can't really get into it too much. If we do, what we do then is we have the possibility of opening ourselves up to claims and liability down the road.
That makes sense. I appreciate that. So I guess then that becomes an HR question.
Yes, and I can jump into that. We met last week, myself, Raphael, and Anjali, and what we owned is that we should have an intranet service. And inside of intranet, we should have all of the explanations around 403Bs and all these things that are critical for our staff to know. When I was in St. Louis, when I was in CPS, you have somewhere where you can go and get this information. It was not common or not normal to speak to the CFO about those things, but we also, as HR, should have been providing that. And so we've never had it, so we are building it now.
Yeah, I would think as an institution, we could have an info session that says, here's the logistics of what you need to know about retirement and what kind of things you can consider.
Have that.
And I don't think I think there's a line where, certainly when DePaul, Northwestern, different institutions I've worked at, they have that where it's not giving financial advice and it's not the CFO, but it is like, this is a big life transition. Let's make sure we give you the tools to be successful.
And we looked for it, and I'm not saying that it wasn't happening, but we just could not locate it where it was happening. So we are working with, we're actually going to probably use some additional support to build it. We've been working on the conversation, like we just finished our new website, and now we want to build an intranet where we can house that information for staff, and we can create videos and things of that nature.
FAQ kind of.
Yeah, so they can know, like we have a responsibility in that. That's not, we can't say, well, we don't have to tell you, no, we should be telling people these things. So.
We've been in conversation with the third-party administrator for the district elective retirement planning, Omni, and I actually have a meeting scheduled, myself and Dr. Calgary, tomorrow at 2 o'clock to talk, to schedule time for the organization to schedule some general conversation about 403B, 457 with our employees. And what I've also, in working with Omni, we developed some material that lays out general information about optional retirement savings. That literature was actually shared with Dr. Calgary, and it will be used by benefit coordinator in HR to be able to use to provide information to newly hired employees and employees who have basic questions about the options for retirement, for enhanced retirement savings.
All right, well,
We're just laughing that we've been asking HR questions and suddenly you all start trickling in.
just in time.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that encompasses that exhausts the list of questions that I had for today's curriculum packet. Unless
They got answered on the
there's just two of us, so I think we've exhausted our list.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to item 6 with Dr. Turner.
All right. Put in a presenter.
Yes, so everyone else, have a good night. It's been a long day.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Turner, you can't go nowhere. Stacy, Andali, Raphael.
Yeah.
Lydia, you might as well stay.
We're just naming names now. Thank you all.
Romy, stay. Yeah.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
She's like, I'm not even trying to move. Just leave me alone. I know you're not going to let me out.
I gotta get on a little bit.
You said you ain't got to tell me twice.
You made us rah-rah sis boom ba this morning. We got to go home. It's all those spirit fingers, man. It tires you out. We're ready for your turn.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, I am Dr. Angel Turner, the Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and I just want to publicly again say to the board, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a very quick and rapid ride since being on this journey since June. And so I'm going to just walk you through high levels the work that has been coming out of schools. All right, so I'll start with hiring. Of course, I started in this role. We've also hired the Director of Schools, Lydia Ryan. Underneath Lydia is the AP of Dual Language that we've hired, Sarah Atrium Cambium. In full transparency right now, because we still need a school leader at Dr. Bessie Rose, we are leveraging Sarah Atrium Cambium in that role so that school leader won't go not being supported. And so we want to make sure that she's there to continue to support while Lydia and I are freed up to then be able to assist on finding her an assistant principal at Dr. Bessie Rose. We've hired tons of school leaders, as you can see. So we started with the school leadership at Lincolnwood. We've hired both the principal and the assistant principal there. We hired an AP at Haven, Elisa Lopez. At King Arts, we hired an AP for Rebecca Calloway, who's the principal there. Nichols, we also brought on another AP. The assistant principal, the second assistant principal who was at Nichols is now at Orrington. Josh Seldis, and he's supporting Dr. Plaza there. We've also hired on new leadership at Dewey, Anna Marie Newsom and Arisha Parham, and they're doing a great job. In addition to that, we've also hired, as part of Palmer's team, we've hired a culture and climate coordinator, Katie Evans, as a new culture and climate coordinator. And then we've hired the FACE liaisons that we referred to earlier, and those 4 FACE liaisons are all housed at Haven. So, hiring has actually taken place the entire summer, but throughout that time, we've also been on the grind, really engaging in the work. And so what you see here is a photo of leaders engaging in the principal retreat the week right after school ended. And so that retreat really encompassed a lot of things. It was our way for getting them together to really do a year-end review, to really assess where we are and do some level of reflection, but then also project to where we're going ahead with our district priorities and expectations. We spent a lot of time with just looking at multiple data sources and really getting clarity and really working with Dr. Griffin and her team around helping us to make sense of the direction in which we're going as far as data analysis in our district. We also spent time just renorming and establishing shared expectations for communication. So we worked with Melissa Messenger and her entire team to just renorm us around communication expectations and what does that look like. Really from the purpose of strengthening family and family engagement in schools, and that is what was really important, is to make sure that our leaders had the tools in their toolkit to be able to do that. We also predicted, and part of that, we worked with Dr. Romey's team and really thinking about how to predict potential problems and create preventive actions around student-centered scheduling, how to really connect those preventive actions, and then how to help leaders to develop and engage in an audit to move forward with developing student-centered scheduling as it relates to supporting our EL and our students with IEPs. And then we also really help to make sense of what are the responsibilities for EL teams and IEP teams in terms of services provided to students, but more importantly, like expectations around compliance. And so that department did a really great job helping us with that. We continue then to work with the C&I department really to get clarity around learning walks, because we know that school learning walks are going to be implemented this year, and we wanted to make sure that leaders understand they start at the school level, engaging in those with the SIT team, and really working through their school work plans to really monitor and assess the progress of what's happening. And our big goal, because in full transparency, you know, there were some missteps when we tried to attempt instructional rounds last year, and we want to make sure that we don't fall in that direction. And part of that misstep was not really ensuring that leaders could articulate the why or the purpose or the what and the how for learning walks, and how that starts again at the school level and is not C&I telling schools what to do, but it's part of our culture and how we assess whether or not things are working to the level of excellence that we want it to. We also collaborated with, we helped them to develop a shared understanding of ways in collaboration and partnership and what that looks like to impact teaching and learning. And so we partnered with Ann Cummins-Bogan, who came in and really did some very targeted work with leaders around that, really around collaborative practices and what does that mean and what does that look like in schools, right? We shared effective practices for implementing systems in our building, right? Dr. Green came and really helped through some of that work with her team in system building. And then we partnered with E3, and don't quote me, educate, evaluate. I can't even think of Dr. Juan Carlos, but that team came in. And what was most important for me, and I'll be fully transparent, being in the role of Director of Literacy last year and having the opportunity to do that work, but also diagnose kind of on the side and do some observation. We experienced a lot of racial issues that came up, and we did not equip leaders with the tools in their toolkit and the strategies to engage in what that means in terms of racial healing. And so that was really a primary focus for us. We did some really heartfelt and touching work with leaders during that time. And then we came back and ended that week with really deepening folks' capacity around the art of coaching. coaching, right? Like, it's more than just giving directives or telling people what to do, but how are you coaching people? How are you having these conversations? And what does that really look like in terms of building the support of the teachers in your building? And we started with leaders, making sure they were equipped with the tools that they needed in their toolkit. So, among all of that, we realized, and I apologize for the cutoff in the screen, we also realized that for us, myself and Lydia stepping into this role in District 65, it's important that we continue to build our capacity around things that we're holding leaders accountable to. And one way to do that, for me specifically, was through AVID training. I came in, we are adopting AVID this year in our middle schools. While I'm very familiar, have experienced AVID myself as a student, I have not been trained prior to attending this training. And so I flew into Seattle with this team, a team of folks from Haven, Nichols, and Shooten. I must say we had an awesome time just really, really engaging in AVID. And so I know and I'm confident that these middle schools have the tools in their toolkit. That all of the staff at those schools are excited about that work, and we're thinking about how to really embed that in advisory, even though we're starting with an AVID class, a focused, targeted group of students. But how do we take some of the staples and make sure that they're embedded school-wide? Lydia and I also had the opportunity to attend the National Principal Supervisor Academy, and this is ongoing professional learning that her and I will engage in. And again, it's around us just making sure we are staying abreast of the tools and the supports needed to really coach principals and assistant principals. Our philosophy this year is really moving away from this focus that's just targeted on principals, but really thinking about how to build principal and assistant principal capacity, because we strongly believe in shared and distributive leadership. Lydia has had the opportunity of engaging in Beyond Diversity in August. I engaged in it in my role as Director of Literacy, along with I participated in SEED all last year, so that was really great professional learning for me. And then we've been diving into Cascade user training. I actually had training June, July. Lydia is scheduled to have training in August, and that is just around us ensuring that our goals are aligned to schools. We're monitoring and holding not only ourselves, but school teams accountable. We also had the opportunity to just establish collaborative partnerships with the different collective bargaining agreement partners. So we had the opportunity in early June to meet with the DEC executive leadership team and the schools team. It started off as a get to know you, but then it ended up with us really working collectively together to really establish what collaborative relationships and practices not only look like for us as a DEC exec and schools team, but then what are the systems and structures we want to really put in place for school leaders and the local school level DEC representatives moving into this year as part of our reset. We also had the opportunity to attend the union leadership meeting with schools, the student services team, the District 65 superintendent and deputy superintendent, where we got to meet all of the collective bargaining agreement partner, executive leadership folks. And then that time was just really spent with us getting clear around our COVID protocol expectations and aligning on those things and making sure that we all were lock in step with what the decisions were. Then after that, it led us right into the new school leader retreat. So all of our new school leaders that were hired on either late June or early to middle July had the opportunity to participate in this week-long retreat. And this retreat was just designed to provide all of the new leaders that were hired at that time the opportunity to build community, to get to know who they are as school leaders, to build their own kind of PLC kind of format, and then really ground themselves in the foundational work of what does it take to be a school leader in District 65. And so we partnered with, again, Ann Cummins Bogan for that work. We partnered with some of the other departments who came in throughout District 65 to really support them. And so that week was dedicated specifically to build their capacity. Another big part of our work, we've been working on the rebranding and summer cleaning projects. Our primary focus was a huge Haven rebranding project. Again, in my role as Director of Literacy, I know that there were a lot of issues that took place and a lot of mistakes, but one of my main goals was that we reset and we really try to get it right at Haven. And one of the things, and again, I had the opportunity to visit a few times there, and it was just some things that I realized we need to do over. One was just the look environment of the school. So you'll notice as part of the rebranding, and kudos to the Buildings and Grounds team. I know they got sick of me. I know Raphael got tired of me. But when I have something and I want it to go, we kind of go hard for it. And so there was painting that was done all over. There was lighting. The lighting projects took place over all of our schools, but specifically at Haven, places where it was dark, these were huge things that really needed to be taken into consideration to ensure that this environment was set up and warm and welcoming for students. And we had our debut celebration where we opened the space up last week, and they could come in and they could see during the back to school picnic. And I must say, it was a great time. As you can see from the picture, I mean, we had families there. The school's team folks were there. Dr. Horton stopped by. Like, it was just a big deal. It felt really good. The energy felt great. And I think what touched my heart was the student ambassadors that this school had, the parents and families that spoke of how they were very appreciative to be in the school and immersed. I mean, I feel like we're on a really good start, and I'm very excited about that. In addition to, even though we prioritized, Haven was a focus for me, I also showed love to all of the rest of the schools, and we did school level project to-do lists. So what I did was I had school leaders to identify what are the summer projects that you would like to get done, and I had them to create a priority list and a wish list. The priority lists were, these are the things that need to get done in our building that directly impact the safety of students and adults. And those are the things that I work with Buildings and Grounds to say, where can the head custodians or the general custodians come in and play a role in getting those things, so touching up paint or doing any of those other specific things. And then on that wish list thing, the wish list, we can think about those things that later over time, we know that we can keep on the horizon to potentially try to get done to just revitalize our schools. And so this has been a huge part of our work this summer in our schools and just creating a different environment. In addition to that, we came into this role really implementing new protocols for communicating critical information to school leaders. So in full transparency, in the past, school leaders have used the principal hub. And so when we came in our 15 listening tours that we're going to talk about in a second, we found out from school leaders it was a hit or miss. Some people read it, some people didn't. And so through this process, and Lydia really leads this, every week, every Friday, the newsletter goes out. We ask our team and departments to then send us whatever information they would like to go out. But what she spends her time doing, both her and I, is really synthesizing the information to make sure it's in leader language so they understand what their role is as leaders, and then how do I need to transfer this back specifically to my school if there are specific actions required. And then she also had the opportunity to create the one-stop shop. And so we know coming into District 65, you have to kind of find your way around a lot of stuff. And so I have a lot of new leaders, as I indicated before. They shouldn't have to search and find. We're trying to figure it out. And so this one-stop shop is for all of our school leaders to be able to put any information or know where everything is. District org charts, institute agendas, like master bail schedule. So everything you can think of is in this one-stop shop. And it's really a way for our mantra, one of our mottos, we have several, is sharing is caring, and really being intentional about how do we share the best practices and the things across this district to ensure that we all are successful. So as I stated a little bit ago, we have school team listening tours. Our purpose, so coming into this role, and I waited to start these listening tours once Lydia was officially on board so that we could do them together. Our purpose for doing them were for several reasons. One, just to build relationships and establish trust and get clear on expectations for SY 22-23. The other one was really to discuss ways to ensure that we create working relationships with them as their direct supervisors, and as the person that is responsible for coaching and building their capacity, and really to provide opportunity for school leaders to just share with us what support they need, where are they having challenges, what summer projects are they struggling with getting done in preparation for the start of the school year. This process looked very different because we had to take into account that our assistant principals didn't come on effectively as 12-month employees until July 1st. And then we also had to take into account principals and assistant principals taking vacations in the summer. So some of these listening tours included 2-on-1 with myself, Lydia, and the principal, or it included 2-on-2s where it was the principal, the assistant principal, myself, and Lydia, or it was a 2-on-3. Our schools that have 2 and 3 assistant principals, it encompassed all of those assistant principals, the principal, myself, and Lydia. And so as a result, we were able to engage in 15 out of 18 of those listening tours. And again, you'll see on the next slide why it's 15 out of 18, because I'll talk to you around how Lydia and I share the direct oversight of schools with my colleague, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, all right? And so this was the school team listening tours. Here's the caseload in terms of who supports what. And so when we talk about caseload, well, exactly what do you mean, Dr. Turner? I mean that this is how we provide our coaching and support. This is how we go in on a weekly, bi-weekly basis and really work with these school teams and these leaders to ensure that they have the supports and the services that you need. You'll notice that the direct oversight of the schools is split between myself, Dr. Romy, and Lydia, but then I've also included the Director of Culture and Climate to also ensure that the 2 culture and climate coordinators who directly report to Mr. Palmer, they have a caseload of folks that they support, because our goal is to have Palmer really doing more training, more coaching of folks, developing capacity so he's not overtaxed in this role. And so again, this is just the structure that I just wanted to share with you in full transparency. Then we ended last week with the School Leader Revitalization Week, which was again an awesome opportunity. And the main goal was again to just dive into some critical learning, some team building, and some collaboration. We had several folks come in. We had the legal conference that took place that week. We had C&I come with just a reminder and updates for our new folks who didn't get it, and a reminder for our existing leaders. We spent a lot of time diving in and working with Terrence's team around getting folks trained around the emergency management suite, and really working with Palmer and Anna Marie around understanding the safety management plan and what that looks like, and what leaders are on the hook for in terms of ensuring that we are set up with the necessary tools we need in the event of a crisis. And I knock on wood, we're not claiming that. And so again, it was just about really making sure that leaders were set up with all of the things, the important things they needed coming into this school year. We also advocated for school leaders to own these days back, right, when it comes to Institute Days. And so we kicked off with a little bit of that this morning. You saw schools started at their school sites. They did some team building fun stuff. They came to the superintendent convocation the latter part of the morning into the afternoon, and then they went back to their schools to either reset or establish school culture, build community, and develop trust and relationships, or to strengthen their instructional capacity for those folks that wanted to continue more deeper learning for the folks on their teams. We also have been engaged in D65 cross-team collaboration, and so our time is really booked, but we recognize that we can't do this work without a lot of my colleagues involved. And so Lydia meets with the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, Dr. Romy, every week as part of really making sure that we're aligned with the COVID expectations, aligned by the CDC and the Evanston Health Department, and she also is part of the conversations with our medical advisory team. I meet with the Assistant Superintendent of HR. That has been ongoing for myself and for Lydia when it comes to hiring, not just at the school leader level, but also making sure that our schools are staffed with the folks they need. We meet with the C&I team weekly. Lydia has now taken on a lot of that. Part of my reason for doing that is really building her capacity and her awareness of the work that's happening in the CNI team, since I was fortunate enough to be in the role of Director of Literacy. And then we meet as a schools team, myself, Lydia, and Palmer, weekly, just to make sure we stay abreast of what's happening in schools. We know how to support, and we can deploy whatever additional supports is needed. We also work this year, this is our new Principal Collaborative Committee. This committee basically will meet with the superintendent and the deputy superintendent once a month. These leaders have been identified by myself and Lydia to be able to be really good thought partners for their colleagues across the district to say, hey, if these are things on the horizon, how can we work collectively with the senior leadership to really make those things happen to better our schools? And so you ask, well, why? What's your why? Why are you doing all of this work? We're doing all of this work to establish and reset how we want to do school this year and being clear on our expectations. Again, we own the I in the Miracles tenet, improving the instructional core, and you can't improve the instructional core until you have these things. Our why is really to bring back the love for learning. Our why is to really get clarity around our expectations. Our why is really to establish, repair, and rebuild trust for all stakeholders. Our why is to build collaborative partnerships with all stakeholders. Our why is to constantly keep reminding folks that all students are at the center of everything that we do. Our why is to continue to demonstrate what transparency and vulnerability looks like. Our why is to model empathy and care, because we recognize that kindness goes a long way. Our why is to own our mistakes and engage in the hard work to, again, restore, repair, and rebuild trust and relationships in school. Our why is because we recognize that relationships matter. Our why is because we aren't perfect, and what we're asking for is that folks give us patience and grace as we continue to do the necessary work for all of the students in this district. And so when you ask Biz, how do we sustain this work? We sustain this work with our 2-on-2s, weekly or bi-weekly, coaching and support that we provide school leaders, either myself or Lydia. We partner with several external partners to continue to provide additional support for our leaders that need that support. We have a lot of new leaders that we talked about at all of our schools, and so we partner with an organization supporting educators who will be supporting those new leaders, both principal and AP, either existing leaders who have been promoted to their role or new leaders coming to our district on just how do we lead with empathy? How do we lead really supporting around the POC work and the work that's coming out of CNI? We also partner with an organization, Mosaic. Mosaic will really be working with, I talked a little bit about, there were certain schools last year that really experienced some racial trauma that need to really engage in some ongoing healing, just starting at the school level, the school leader level first, and developing their self-awareness, but then recognizing how do they support their teams around nurturing the whole child, and what does that really mean? We sustain this work through our monthly school collaboratives. We're moving away from principal and assistant principals being in 2 separate professional learnings next year, so they will be together in the professional learning so they can have the opportunity not only to learn together, but to reflect and then do the application and say, now what does this look like back at our respective schools? How do we sustain this? We sustain this work by continuing to partner with Ann Cummins Bogan to support our leaders around fostering a culture of collaboration. And she's been doing a lot of work just really diving into our D65 educator appraisal system with us. And so we just appreciate that work with her. How do we do this work? We do this work by also working with another consultant, Doug Bolton, who is really working with our leaders around the soft skills of leadership. When we talk about emotional intelligence, when we talk about that adult social, SEL, these are the things that Doug really works with our leaders, and he started that work with them, both him and Ann, during our school leader revitalization week. And then, how do we sustain this work? By continuing to build community among our leaders. We've adopted Google Spaces as a way for them to share different ideas, different things that they have. And then we continue to do this by modeling team building, and we've given them several different resources to help to support how to then engage in very targeted team building back at their schools. And that's it. That's the schools team. And as I said before, we have been on the grind doing some Herculean work, but it's good work, and we're confident that this work is really going to bring about the necessary change in District 65.
Woo!
So, Angel, I'll start by saying, and anybody who's attended these meetings knows that I'm consistently fixated about relationships. Perhaps my counseling background is where that comes from, right? So I appreciate all the explicit language on this. I think that relationships is a word we throw out all the time, but like not having a clear path, which I really like seeing the clear, what are the actual steps and interventions in the professional relationships. I think my next question for your team would be like, and then how does this carry over to students and families, right? That obviously we have to oxygen masks first, so improving our relationships as educators is really important, but how do we, I think all of the relationships were compromised during the pandemic, and we just can't do all of the other big lifts without people feeling those trusting relationships. So I'm excited to see how this is looking in the way that you're engaged. I'm excited for you in this role, but I want us to continue to think about, okay, then how does a student feel that? How does a family feel that, right? How does staff to staff, right? Not just from the leader down. So, continuing to think about how does this carry forward in the way that it gets embedded in everything we're doing. One thing I would also say is that I'm excited for, it seems like there's a lot of thought and intention around being proactive. I feel like the last year we've been playing whack-a-mole, and that there were things that probably needed to get handled before it came to us or before it came to Dr. Horton that didn't. So I think having some of these things in place should make a big difference, and having those relationships in place. As I identified in a previous board meeting, like we're still going to have to battle racism and white supremacy. There's still going to be the people working around, but the more that folks can have trusting relationships and feel like that they have clear and they understand their expectations, hopefully there'll be less of the inclination to feel like they're not getting their needs met on the other levels. So I'm very excited about all this. So one question I did have is for our FACE liaisons, what percentage of those are bilingual?
FACE liaisons. None.
Okay.
None. However, I will say, I should have prefaced this, the assistant principal that we hired at Haven,
Bilingual.
Elisa Lopez, is bilingual, native speaking. And so, and did such an amazing job. I just want to publicly recognize her, because at the back to school picnic, she connected with our families, and that made a huge difference. You would be surprised at the amount of families that came to her and came to me, just appreciative of the fact that she was there and they feel included in the process. And so I want to publicly say thank you to Ms. Lopez.
Great. I think that is a concern, right? We've had FACE liaisons before that were bilingual. I think we want to be thinking about that in our long-term hiring, and probably be thinking about that in general of what is the right metric for district-wide, what percentage of our staff needs to be bilingual when, to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students and families, that it shouldn't be that somebody has to go to the one person in the building who can meet that need, but that there's a variety of.
We've been extremely cognizant of that in our hiring process. And so for the FACE liaisons, this is the design, the title is a little different. These are newer positions, and we base these hires based off when we looked at students that have high frequency of issues. So we kind of aligned it that way to some degree, but we are very conscious of our hiring. We actually have to hire.
I think across the district, I just, in this role, and I know that we want to make sure we're meeting the identified needs.
That bilingual
but there might
leader for Haven was critical, because I don't think it's been, we haven't had that.
And then what is the, I know previously we had FACE roles at other schools, not just Haven, so what?
I know, this is the first time that we've had those.
Were they
FACE department.
That it wasn't based, it wasn't school-based, right? It was JEH.
Right.
Okay, so sorry. So are they just based at Haven, but they meet the needs of other schools?
They're at Haven right now because of the challenges that we dealt with.
Yeah.
But this is why they are technically JEH staff, because as we work to right the ship, we will be able to shift FACE if there are other issues that arise to different campuses versus them being staffed at Haven. But Haven has been our target.
No, yeah, I mean, as the Haven liaison,
that face
I don't need
department
that
is-
explained, but
Yeah.
it's like, I feel it. I just know that, we have had, wherever they were placed, staff that had responsibilities or relationships across different buildings, so us anticipating kind of where those needs might emerge, and, as we shift to make sure we address one problem, that we're not creating another one in another building. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't have any comments about your presentation. I really deeply appreciate it.
Do you have a dinner reservation at 6 o'clock?
I do have to feed my children.
I love it.
But yeah, I appreciate the work that has gone into preparing us and the level of compassion as well as expertise that has gone into those thoughtful preparations. And I felt like the enthusiasm for the school year was palpable at the convocation this morning, and I'm sure that a lot of that has to do with this level of readiness that our leaders are feeling and the way that they've been able to translate the relationships that they've built to relationships with their teams at their buildings. And that's always a promising start. So, yeah, I failed to welcome everybody back at the beginning of the meeting, and so.
Like we never left. We never got it.
But, yeah, I really appreciate that, and welcome back, even though y'all have been grinding all summer.
Can I give one huge shout out? We had our first legal conference last Tuesday. HR led that. Dr. Kilgotti, would you like to just share some high notes? That means 2 minutes, if that, on the purpose and what we, like, who was the targeted audience and why we did that.
So this past, a week ago, Tuesday, we were able to host an event at King Arts where we invited every director, manager from across the district, principals, school leaders, assistant.
You say invited, it was required.
Voluntold.
Yes, voluntold. Really started early in the day from 8:15 till almost 4 o'clock. We engaged in really a round robin of about 12 different workshops. We were joined by our partners from Forensic to hear about some of the important laws around gender equity, discrimination, Title IX. We discussed mandated reporting, really thinking about all the procedures and the laws involved and really ensuring that we are planning a safe and purposeful approach to all of our instruction. One of the quotes that I'll never forget is really, we have an obligation, parents honor us with their children every single day. And so we as school leaders, as managers in the district, have a responsibility to do everything we can to engage in a responsible practice. And that was really impactful on me to think about that joy factor of why we do this work, why do we think about these policies, why do we pay attention to these rules and these laws, is because we have that equal and important burden of responsibility for our children every single day. And really, the feedback from the conference overall was really impressive. Many people came to me saying, this is my first time participating in such a legal learning experience. The cross-pollination amongst leaders was really also important to think about. A lot of the topics around, we also talked about evaluation systems, learned about purchasing, business and finance team came out and talked a lot about our responsibility around how do we process information and a lot of the costs involved, so. Thank you.
I appreciate that, especially because that is a growth metric for our district to have the capacity as well as the focus on what may feel like mundane information, but critical information to keeping the work stable so that we can focus on relationships and children and families the way that our system should be. So thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for organizing that, Dr. Kilgotti. So that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda today. With no further business before the committee, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 5:56.